Do you have students who complain that they're bored when they have to do anything that doesn't give them immediate gratification? Chores, writing assignments, maybe reading activities? If so, I wanted to share a question that came up in one of my groups for SLPs that might help you out. The therapist was working with the student on things like morphology and vocabulary in their sessions, and then they were making some recommendations for the parents to work on at home. And she said, well, this student's mom is telling me that the student is complaining that he's bored when they're working on those things at home, and that this comes up a lot. So my first question was, is this student saying that they're bored just when they're working with their mom? Is this something that is happening across the board? Because that's relevant. My second question would be, what else is happening? Is the student still moving through with the activity? Is the student making progress with the task? Like, what else is going on? Is this a major issue, or is this just a comment that the student is making when you ask them to do something that isn't their favorite thing to do? So if the student is just complaining of boredom with certain people, chances are it's because they know that they're getting a response from this particular person, and they know that that's something they can do to stall or get out of the activity. Especially if this is something that is just happening when the student is working with mom. If it's not coming up in your sessions, but it's happening at home, then chances are it's not really that much of an issue, especially if you're making good progress in your sessions with kids and they're just complaining of boredom with specific people. In that instance, what I would recommend doing is doing some coaching with mom or dad or whoever the student is doing that with, just to help them redirect when the student is making those comments. Chances are it might not be that big of a deal. It might be a case where you can just, simply coach the parents to say, like, I understand that you're bored, but we need to do this because, we need to get this done before we can do this other activity. We don't need to sit there and convince the student that it's not boring. We could just acknowledge that, okay, I understand, I hear you, but sometimes we need to do things that we don't want to do. It's just a fact of life. Not everything is going to be super exciting all the time. And it's just, this might be something that isn't your favorite thing to do, but it's okay. It's okay to feel bored sometimes, and we're just going to do it anyways. So if this is a situation where the student is complaining of boredom across the board, chances are you might have to incorporate what I just said across multiple settings. Just because a student is bored doesn't mean that the activity isn't beneficial to them. It doesn't mean you need to convince them to not be bored or that this is something that has to be their favorite activity. The thing that you can do is just be firm and kind, and eventually you might be able to help the student utilize some self-talk, because this is something that's going to be really important to them in working through that feeling you get when you want to sit down and do a writing assignment or something else that isn't a preferred task for you. So again, a lot of times people are worried about the engagement piece with some of these linguistically challenging tasks, and they're saying, how do I make sure it's fun for my students? How do I make sure my students aren't bored? Well, it's not your job to entertain students. It's your job to teach students skills that are going to help them learn and help them to be functioning adults one day. And one of those things that they need to learn is to be able to delay gratification and also persist through things that are cognitively challenging, that require them to work through that feeling of discomfort and, yes, sometimes boredom that happens when we do something that doesn't offer us some immediate dopamine hit, like watching TV or being on social media. We do want to give them a productive way just to kind of redirect, but we don't need to sit there and convince the student that it's not boring. That's not your job. Your job is to help students to work up a tolerance for it. It's not to save them from it. One of the things that I always tell my SLPs when they ask this question, because they're always worried when I'm telling them, you know what, we don't have to have all these bells and whistles in our therapy sessions and worry so much about the engagement piece. Sometimes just teaching students skills that are going to make them feel more confident and competent with some of those challenging tasks is enough to improve that engagement. Sometimes the engagement and the buy-in is going to increase if you simply help students be successful in those academic environments. And if we always are teaching them that they have to be entertained all the time, it's going to be way harder for them to do that. Now, if you are an SLP and you are looking for some specific ways that you can improve your students' language skills in a way that is evidence-based, that is actually going to support those comprehension skills, support those vocabulary skills that are going to give them the underlying language skills that they need for that high-level comprehension and those more difficult academic tasks, then definitely check out Language Therapy Advanced Foundations, my program for SLPs that teaches them a complete framework for language therapy. Again, it is a no-frills approach. You can certainly add your own flair once you learn the system, but it is really coming down to those essential skills that students need in order to be successful and confident in their academic journey. So to check out Language Therapy Advanced Foundations, go to drkarenspeech.com/language therapy to learn more about that program. It is possible for you to help your students be engaged and confident without having to do complicated crafts and games that take forever for you to prep and plan. And it's really about helping students be successful and confident. Again, check it out at drkarenspeech.com/language therapy. Again, that is my Language Therapy Advanced Foundations program for SLPs.